Jaya Yashoda Nandana Jaya Prajananjana Jaya Yashoda Nandana Jaya Prajananjana Jaya Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Kunja Vihari 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 Jaya Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Madhava Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Jai Shri Shri Radha Madhav ki Jai Jai Shri Shri Lal Gopal ji ki Jai Jai Shri Nasingh Bhagwan ki Jai Jai Shri Shri Panch Tattva ki Jai Jai Shri Shri Sarpo Swami Prabhu ki Jai Jai Shri Lal Gopal ki Jai Shri Shri Guru Parampara ki Jai Shri Lal Gurudev ki Ananta Kori Vaishnavind ki Jai Gaura Premanandi Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya One time a devotee asked one Maharaj who had just seated himself for class, why do people waste flowers by putting it on the necks of people only later to throw them away? So that Maharaj said, to make the flower useful, should I eat it? Is that how the material energy values items which are of intangible value in this world? Then until and unless it is used in a manner which we know our senses will normally enjoy them, then only it becomes of value. And that is what we are going to learn today. That there is a world of difference between understanding things the way a sadhu sees and understanding things the way a materialist sees. When we see the hand of Krishna in everything around us, our perspective changes. When we cannot see the hand of Krishna, then the perspective that we have always gives us disturbance, always gives us agitation. It doesn't allow us to be clear in our thoughts, and it makes us lose our intelligence. So this is Nano 24. Sri Ram Gopal Ki. Every day I remember him. He took so much trouble to get all this done. Once Krishna was ready to wind up his pastimes in this world, and he was ready to detach himself from the Yadava race because he comes from the Yadu dynasty. The Yadu dynasty became glorious because of Krishna and not the other way around. Just like all the constellations in the world, when Krishna was going to be born, actually the signs were not in place. They were not regarded auspicious. But Bhagavatam tells us that the moment Krishna was going to take birth, and the word spread to all the parts of the universe, to all the great devatas and all the great personalities, then even the stars aligned themselves so that everything became auspicious. This is very important for us. Our auspiciousness is not defined by anything material. The moment we invoke the presence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead into our lives, whatever that is inherently inauspicious can align itself with auspiciousness. So we should never be mixed up and confused that it is material energy that ultimately governs us. External energy of the Lord is very strong, but those who take shelter of the Lord, the internal potency will begin to act. No doubt this body and the elements of nature, which we will learn shortly, have by themselves great influence and power over us. But they only have it to the extent that we are not devotees of the Lord. King Yadu is actually a very great ancestor in the Yadu dynasty. And when Krishna was going to leave the world, the Yadavas moved to Prabhash Kshetra. How many of you have been to Prabhash Kshetra? So it's a very, it's not easily known, or it's not very accessible in one sense. It's also not a place where Vaishnavas tend to gather so much, because it is a place where Krishna was leaving. So the Yadavas came and settled in Prabhash Kshetra. And Uddhava, in the 11th canto, he comes to take darshan of Krishna. So there is an entire conversation between Krishna and Uddhava. And the gist of it was that Krishna told Uddhava that now my time is coming when I want to leave this world because I am winding up my pastimes. And he said that in Kali Yuga, the items in Kali Yuga may not be favorable for you also to stay too long. So you should also pack your bags and leave. Like we are going to leave this very late. So when things are favorable, Krishna wanted Uddhava with him, and so he began speaking in many wonderful language of Bhagavatam, teachings of Krishna to Uddhava. That entire section of Bhagavatam is known as Uddhava Gita. In one portion of it, Krishna then begins to speak of how one can use intelligence to control the mind in such a way that one can begin to see the presence of the Lord in all the material energies that are manifested in this world. How a devotee's attitude can either make or break his devotion service. So in this regard, Krishna then told Uddhava that once, long time ago, there was a king called Yadu. And Yadu one time was traveling, in that area, when he came across a very great personality whom he described as an avadut. As I said, an avadut is a person who is a very great personality. He is very great because he is completely renounced from the material aspect of life. Now, Lord Nityananda was known as an avadut. An avadut also is so exalted in his spiritual nature that Bhagavatam says that he can transgress all norms which are social and material. So this Avadut was wandering around completely self-satisfied, non-envious, and very peaceful. And yet, when King Yadu observed him, he was actually exposed completely to the elements. He had no children, he had no wife, he had no family, he had no house. He had no proper source of food, no proper source of income. He had nothing. And yet he looked completely peaceful. So King Yadu approaches the Avadut and asks him, "My dear sir, your look and your disposition immediately tells me that you are very, very transcendental to your surroundings. And it must be that you have somehow utilized your intelligence to come to this conclusion. So please tell me how you have come to this platform wherein you have transcended the energies of this material world." So the Avadut then tells him that I have traveled so much in this world, and in my travels I have learned to come to this position of transcending the material modes and external energy of the Lord, because I have learned so many things from material nature. So then King Yadu became curious, and he thought, how is it that you can learn anything from this material nature? Because material nature by itself, its laws are very stringent. By nature, material nature evokes 3 causes of misery, 4 stations of inevitable miseries in the form of birth, death, old age and disease, 6 different phases of growth, dwindling, deterioration and ending. So in all this, how are you able to find something which is even saintly, which is even transcendental? So at that point, the Avadut decides, you please sit down, King Yadu, and now I will explain to you what I have learned from this world. And thus begins the great narration of the 24 Gurus whom the Avadut had met. So the Avadut then starts by way of introduction by telling King Yadu, I have learned everything there is to know about spiritual life through the 24 Gurus whom I have met in my travels. And King Yadu says, who are they? So today we will look at the 24 Gurus, and we will try to understand what Bhagavatam tells us the Avadut learned from each Guru. Everything that he learned is completely applicable to us, not in a philosophical level, but rather on a very, very practical level. And by the end of this entire session, we hope that all of us, myself included, will come to a position where we can fully appreciate that the real test of Krishna consciousness is when a devotee sees the hand of Krishna in situations and circumstances. That is very important. That's what divides a great devotee from a struggling devotee. So, the Avadut starts by saying that my first guru actually is Mother Earth. And he says that I learned something very great from Mother Earth. Bhutai akamyamanapi. That is the first verse that is here. Bhutai akamyamanapi. Meaning to say that the first guru that I have is Earth. And in Earth I have learned one very important thing. It's a very important verse in 11:7:37. A sober person, even when harassed by other living beings, how he should behave. He should behave in such a way that he understands that those who harass him, his aggressors, they are also acting helplessly under the control of God. Because those who harass others, they are actually harassed by the 3 modes of material nature. They are also individual. Have you realized how sometimes people who are very tense and troubled by their own problems, unable to cope with them, they spill down on you? Very often it happens when you are close to these persons. They don't want to, but you can literally see them helplessly being unable to control their emotions, their words, and they come out by saying very harsh things. Sometimes they harass you also because of mistaken conceptions. So, Bhagavatam tells us that it helps us a lot when we understand that these people who are trying to cause trouble for us, they themselves are in trouble. They themselves are in trouble. And then Bhagavatam says, we should behave in such a way that we should be completely nurturing. The word that is used in the verse is nurturing. That means we should not deviate from our mark. Mark is the path. So the Avadut says that a devotee should never be distracted from the progress of his own path, even if he is harassed. And he should understand that those who are harassing him, they are also in difficulty. This mood will ensure that we do not become hateful and we do not become spiteful or angry with those who are angry with us. Otherwise, it's a matter of action and counteraction. And the Avadut says, from earth I have learned the art of tolerance. This whole verse can only work if you are tolerant by nature. He says, look at this earth. He's telling the king, in this earth, on Mother Earth, so many people exploit her. They do deep oil, sea drilling. They do atomic explosions for testing. They do pollution on the earth. They basically waste Mother Earth. And despite all the constant harassment that she's going through, the Avadut says that she is always never intolerant. Hardly she fights back. If at all she fights back, is in the form of your own karmas, which come in the form of natural disasters. And that is not the earth fighting back. That is the stringent laws of material nature. That is something that is between us and the superintendent of the material world. It's a very important point. But Mother Earth on her own, even though she is harassed, sometimes her beautiful forests are cut down by greedy men. Sometimes wastelands are created. Sometimes the earth's surface is soaked with blood. Why? Because man fights bloody wars. And despite all this that's happening on the surface of the earth continues to provide necessities to all living beings. If we did not work, if we did not plan our lives in this way, and instead we followed Prabhupada's way of simple living and high thinking, of living off the earth, of being peaceful with our surroundings, then we will have more than enough to actually live in this world. And that is a fact. Many scientists, many statistics have come up with this. I don't have to tell you that. So the Avadut is right. The earth is a great source of a lesson in tolerance. So the Avadut said, only if you can tolerate the difficulties that come to you, like Mother Earth is tolerating all of us, then only can you develop the spirit of selfless service. Very important connection between tolerance and service. Sometimes we ask ourselves, when I'm doing seva, I become agitated. How to become selfless in my service? How to become unmotivated and uninterrupted? The key is, the more we tolerate, the more selfless we become. And this tolerance should not be on the basis of mindless tolerance. Sometimes we tolerate a person because we say, I can't stand him, I hate him, but what do I have to tolerate? That really is not tolerance. Tolerance in the spiritual world doesn't mean tolerance in the material world. Tolerance in the material world has a bad connotation. It means, you know what, I'm just tolerating you. You know why? Because I know you're full of nonsense, but what to do, because of all these circumstances, I have to tolerate you. That is not devotee. The earth doesn't teach us that. The Avadut tells us that Bhutai akramyamano api, even though people are harassing us, a Vaishnava understands that they are also harassed by their past karmas, by the difficulties of their material bodies, by the difficulties of their own present arrangement, by their own frustrations, by their lack of control of their own senses. And instead of becoming angry with them, we become compassionate with them. In that compassion, tolerance becomes a doable thing. It doesn't become something that is difficult for a Vaishnava. It becomes a part of his culture. And those who are tolerant genuinely in this way, Bhagavatam tells us they can serve selflessly. And they will become peaceful when they serve selflessly. Mother Earth never stops serving her children, despite difficulties, despite the pain. And Bhagavatam tells us, not only does she serve, she also provides. So service is not only serving, but service is also providing. That is very important. The next guru that the Avadut came across was the mountain. So from the mountain, the Avadut told the king, my dear king, do you realize the nature of mountains? These mountains, they have unlimited quantities of earth. They are great sources of sustenance to all kinds of living entities. Trees, plants, birds, animals, entire systems are thriving on mountains. Mountains also give you unlimited qualities of crystalline water in the form of waterfalls and streams. And this water, when it comes down to earth, it gives life to everyone. In other words, a mountain is a platform on which all other living entities can flourish. The Avadut said the same principle of selfless service that you see in earth, you can also learn from the mountain. The mountain carries a huge burden on itself. So many things are dependent on the mountain. But even though everything is on the mountain, it is always simply providing happiness. It doesn't restrict anything from growing on it. The flora, the fauna, they all grow naturally on the mountain. Mountain doesn't discriminate, it doesn't restrict. So the saintly Avadut said, 4 things I can learn from this mountain. 1, that we should devote our efforts in the service of others. This is a mood of a Vaishnava. A Vaishnava always thinks first of others. Am I putting someone in difficulty? This is very important. What is that verse in the 12th chapter, Brody? That says one doesn't put others in difficulty? Sorry, yeah, yasman not vijate loko, loka not vijate chayaha. This is a very important quality of a devotee. A devotee never puts others into difficulty. This is his mood. And how automatically you put others in difficulty is when you don't devote your efforts to serve them. Then you put others in difficulty. Second thing he learned, to always make the welfare of others the sole reason for his existence. If we live to serve the devotees and serve everyone, with that mood if we live, actually we become very peaceful. Sometimes people say, if I live for everyone and I don't live for myself, I become frustrated. But for a Vaishnava, that's not the case. A Vaishnava lives for himself, but he lives to make himself a proper receptacle for the service of others. And in that way, he becomes very peaceful. Third, the mountain teaches us that one should learn the art of providing happiness for all living entities. It is an art, Bhagavatam says. It is not easy to try and make everyone happy. And very often in material world, you cannot make everybody happy, isn't it? You make one camp happy, the other camp is not happy. You make your father happy, mother's not happy. You make brother happy, sister's not happy. You make wife happy, you don't have another wife, but you make your children also happy. So like that, we are always in difficulty. When you work, you want to take care of a team that's under you, you're bound to have people you can take care of better, and people who will say, you're biased towards this one person. So that's why Bhagavatam says it is an art to provide happiness for everyone. It never always works, but the mountain tries very hard. And the last point that's very important, one should always become a platform to encourage other living entities to take up devotional service. The mountain never restricts anyone from growing or performing any activities. So in that way, we should always encourage the living entities to take up devotional service and therefore live in peace and in happiness. So the Avadut came to this point. Now if you look at the specific verse, I did not print it here, but there Bhagavatam in the purport says very nicely that there is a certain 2 words in Sanskrit, right? It's para artha kanta. If you put it together, that's what it is. Sambhavaha. Madhvacharya, our Acharya, whom we are coming from that line, he says that the mountain gives us the example of how we should dedicate all our wealth and assets to the welfare of others. The mountain is actually a wealthy resource of minerals, flora, fauna, systems, but it never is stingy about it. People all the time go up to mountains and they extricate everything. The mountain doesn't stop them. In that way, Vaishnavas should learn how to dedicate whatever money, whatever wealth that Krishna has given us, use it in the service of Krishna. By using it in the service of Krishna, you use it in the service of everyone. Because Krishna is always pleased when the devotees and living entities are served. And Madhvacharya also says that if you acquire opulence, then you should especially try to please Guru and Krishna. And the Devatas, as well as the truly respectable superior personalities, will automatically become pleased. The most difficult thing for us to part with is always that thing which is in our pocket or in our bank. We may speak so much philosophy, but when it comes to actually translating it in terms of maintenance or building something or buying land for Krishna or building a temple, then it becomes very difficult. That is why the mountain is a good example of one who gives freely, and a Vaishnava should follow. And the concluding point of the mountain, by developing this saintly conduct, then one will become tolerant. You remember the first point of tolerant? Tolerance by earth equals to or leads to selfless service. Tolerance by the mountain will free one from the useless agitation of the material senses. That's what Bhagavatam tells us. The more you learn to tolerate on the basis of understanding that you are not this body and the other person is also not this body, your mind and your senses don't become so unnecessarily agitated. You learn to step back and see things from a different perspective. And that is how we become peaceful in this world. Otherwise, what happens is, we always wander around searching for material happiness. But you and I know that material happiness comes. But when happiness comes, it brings a package. There will always be material sadness and anxiety just next to it. Anything that goes up must come down in this world. So this is how the Avadut learned from the mountain. The Avadut then turned to the tree. And he then told King Yadu, my dear king, have you seen the trees that grow in this world? Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, Prabhupada writes, has emphasized that the tree denotes the greatest quality of tolerance. And that is why we have this very important Shastakam verse. And here it is nicely stated that if we want to be always in the mood of Kirtaniya Sada Harihi, then we must be as tolerant as a tree. Very, very important. One who is as tolerant as a tree, Mahaprabhu says, he can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So Bhagavatam actually emphasizes on behavior. Bhagavatam is about behavior. In case we think that we are in the chalet for philosophy, that's not true. What is the point of talking philosophy and going home and our lives don't change? The whole of Bhagavatam is moving towards the position of changing the way we act. We must behave what we speak about. That is a true spiritual master. And the tree teaches us that if you want to chant consistently Krishna's names, then do one thing. Learn to exercise tolerance from a spiritual angle, not from a material angle. Learn to see the living entities as part and parcel of Krishna. Your tolerance becomes much easier. The tree gives so much fruit. The tree gives so much from itself. Cooling shade, beautiful flowers, natural medicine, all this is coming from the tree. The tree bark can give you so much medicine. And if it's a hot day when you go under a tree, somehow it's very cool. Isn't it true? Actually, coming from Singapore, I never understood that. Nobody in Singapore will sit under a tree when it's hot. We just turn on the AC and sit in the room. Or we turn on the fan. In urban cities, no one realizes the value of a tree. It's only when I was in Dwarka, that's when I realized the real value of a tree. And in Rajkot. Rajkot, to see a tree is very difficult. Because it's very desert area, Saurashtra area. And sometimes it's very hard to see nice shady trees. But somehow in our compound, the trees took about seven years to grow. And after a while when they grew, when it's a hot day in the afternoon, and in June the temperatures hit 48, 49, 50. And when you sit under a cooling tree, you don't even need to drink water. You just feel that even your thirst is quenched. Somehow the tree has a way of capturing the wind, and you feel actually very cool under the tree. It's the greatness of Krishna and the greatness of this material nature. So the tree stands all day in the burning sun. The tree is taking on the burning sun, isn't it? Nobody gives shade to the tree. The top of the tree is taking all that burning sun, but giving us the shade. The same tree is standing in the freezing cold, and the wood of the tree is used by people to give people warmth. So tree can give you cool, it can also keep you warm. And Bhagavatam tells us, a woodcutter may sit under a tree before he begins cutting the same tree down. And when he sits under a tree, the tree never says, oh, you're going to cut me down, no shade for you. No. You can pluck a fruit and eat it before you cut the tree down. Tree doesn't say anything. And by understanding that, the other good said, we should learn this lesson for us. And that is, that in both cases, the tree never complains. The tree accepts. Whatever harassment that comes, the tree understands. This is material nature. So even when a tree is cruelly cut down and dragged, it doesn't shout, it doesn't scream, it doesn't protest. Bhagavatam says it continues to give service in the form of fire. Therefore, the Agavud said, one should become a disciple of such a tree. Why? Because you can learn from the tree the conduct of a saintly person, developed on the form of enlightened tolerance. So Vaishnavas are not tolerant based on ignorance. We are tolerant because we understand that the nature of this world is to give you harassment. Whether it comes from somebody, whether it comes from something, once we understand that this is the nature of the world, our tolerance factor becomes very easy. We can tolerate. But if we cannot understand that this is the nature of the world, then we become frustrated. There's a beautiful verse, describing Lord Shiva. And yesterday we did Lord Shiva. In the 8th canto, 7th chapter, 44th verse, the title of the chapter is Lord Shiva Saves the Universe. It is the example where Lord Shiva became Neelakanta. You remember Parvati Mata yesterday, Sati? Remember how she indirectly was talking to Lord Shiva and telling him, oh, blue-throated one? Yes. So like that, this is the episode where the Lord drinks that terrible poison which is killing the Devatas and the demons who are churning the ocean of milk to get Amrit. The pastime of Mohini Murti, right? And the pastime of the churning of the milk ocean. So at that point of time, Lord Shiva is approached by the Devatas. Please save this world and save us from the poison. Lord Shiva is a great personality. He doesn't think of whether the poison will harm him or not. But because he has great faith in the Supreme Lord and he has great love and compassion for humanity, he drinks the poison. And because of his greatness of compassion, the poison doesn't harm him. It only stops at the point of his throat and it doesn't go further. And at that point, Bhagavatam says, Tapyante lokatapena sadhavaha prayasho janaha parama aradhanam taddihi purushasya akila atmanaha. Very important verse. And the translation is very beautiful. It is said that great personalities almost always accept voluntary suffering because of the suffering of people in general. This is considered to be the highest method of worshipping Krishna, who is present in everyone's heart. Every line is pregnant with meaning. If you know Krishna is in the heart of your aggressor, you will not behave like an aggressor. Isn't it so? If you accept and realize that Krishna is in the heart of everyone, you will avoid that association, but you will not cause harm and destruction. That's why Prabhupada wrote in the purport that I showed you last time on Vaishnava etiquette. We understand Krishna is in everyone's heart, but that doesn't mean we go and embrace a tiger. But we avoid the tiger. Not because we hate the tiger, but because we know we can't deal with the tiger. That is all. And Prabhupada writes here, our only endeavor is to become Krishna conscious. And if you try to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world, that is the best welfare activity. So for Vaishnavas, welfare activity does not only mean the usual forms of welfare activity in this material world. What we really want is to give Krishna consciousness, so that we come to a higher level of behavior. And we can also serve the living entities and make them happy with this wonderful philosophy. So this is what he learned from the great mountain, the great earth, and the great tree. Now the other one says, let me see the sun. He said, I was walking when I saw the great sun. And just by observing the sun, I came to learn so many things from the sun. The other one said, from the sun I learned the same spirit of selfless service. Why? The sun evaporates water. But what does it do with the water is very important. It creates rain. And it gives that same water back to earth. Sea water is useless for many purposes. The sun will evaporate the sea water and it makes it into pure rainwater. There's a nice quote, from His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, who took several lectures in this area. And I particularly like this point that he gave because it's very practical. Let's read it together. Here in Mumbai, we live near the sea. But what happens if there is no good monsoon? There is unlimited quantity of water just 2 blocks away from here at Chowpatty beach. But yet, every day, when the Bombay Water Department turns on water supply for a couple of hours, everybody is turning on their tanks and filling it up. Why? Because seawater is useless for all practical purposes. And if some year there is insufficient monsoons, there is very big cry of concern. How will we survive? How will we wash? How will we drink? How will we cook? So can't we appreciate the benediction of the sun? The sun is just taking the seawater, making it into something wonderful, and giving it back to society. Such a nice point. Just sitting in a temple, great personalities can take the essence of the surroundings around them. So a saintly person, the other would say, whatever they learn, they use it for the welfare of others. They don't waste time speculating, criticizing, what if this, what if that. There is useless use of the brain. The brain will continue doing that. You remember the famous story of eating the mango, isn't it? 3 men were just standing around and they were waiting a whole day for the mango to drop. Just when the mango is about to drop, strong wind comes and pushes the branch down. A crow comes and sits on the branch, and then the mango drops. The men have been waiting to taste the mango. They pick up the mango, and then suddenly one man says, before you eat, let me ask you, what do you think caused the mango to drop? He said, well, it must have been the gust of wind. The second man said, no, I think it was the weight of the bird. The third man said, I think it's a combination of both. Like that, they just continued talking and philosophizing, armchair speculating, and after so much of talking to satisfy their reasoning and logic, one small boy walks by, sees the mango on the floor, sees the 3 men discussing, thinks, what is a mango for? It's meant to be tasted. Picks up the mango, bites into it, and walks away with it. No rationalizing, just testing and tasting. So the true test of intelligence is when you test it. And when you test it, you get to taste it. This is the mood of an Avadut. Instead of thinking how bad the sun is, he's seeing how good the sun is. The rationalists will say all these elements can cause destruction. That is true. But a devotee will see the good side. And that is why he is devotee. That is the major difference between a consciousness of a person who is materialistic and critical and a person who wants to see Krishna's hand in everything. So that is why a devotee doesn't just use his knowledge. He uses his skills, his talents, his wealth, whatever that he gets, he gives it back to the society. And that's what all of you are doing. Look at how nicely this whole program has been arranged. So much organizational skills has gone into it. Sumit Prabhu and the team of devotees have worked so hard. And they have made it so easy for us that we are now peaceful sitting here after our belly is full. The prasadam team is at the back, cleaning and cooking and getting ready for the next batch of prasadam. That is selfless service. They are doing that so that we can sit here peacefully and we can hear. See, this, do you not think that they will benefit? Do you think that Radha Mata doesn't have the eyes, X-ray vision to see through that wall and see who are the persons behind who are doing service? Oh, Krishna has all X-ray vision. He can see everything. So now he says the Avadut also learned something else. Just like the sun evaporates large quantities of water with its potent rays, and then it turns the water in a form of rain, the saintly person will accept whatever material objects that come, and then at the appropriate time, when the person has approached him to request them, he will return the material objects. This is very important. Saintly persons do not keep anything for themselves. Whenever they can be used, they will immediately give it up. Prabhupada always had beautiful watches and gifts given to him. And every time people gave him expensive rings and watches, the moment Prabhupada came back from a trip, he would give them out to everyone. There was one devotee who didn't become a devotee at that time, who had come to steal from Prabhupada. He saw Prabhupada's watch and he liked it and he thought, I want to steal his watch. So he came with the idea of stealing, but Prabhupada, was smarter than him. And Prabhupada said that if you want the watch, you can have it. And because Prabhupada was not attached to the watch, that watch became the connection between Prabhupada and this living entity. And the living entity became so touched by Prabhupada's magnanimity that he never left the temple. And he became initiated and he did so much service for the movement. In this way, a Vaishnava never discriminates, but at the right time, he gives the objects which connect people back to Krishna. So, in accepting and giving up the objects of the senses, a Vaishnava is not empowered. It doesn't mean much to him. Why? Because a Krishna conscious person never thinks whatever he has got is his. The proprietorship is always given to the lordships. He knows that he's only holding everything on borrowed and rental basis. Like all of us are in the sharing now. Now we're going to leave by the afternoon. Will anyone cry? Maybe you cry because you're missing the devotees. That is acceptable. Please cry. Maybe you cry because nice prasadam when I go back, oh my God. Prasadam is available. I leave it to you all. Or maybe you cry because tomorrow I go back to work and all this wonderful thing is not there. That's okay. But nobody will cry and say, my God, I love this place so much, I have to stay here. No. Nobody will do that. And in the same way, we should live in this world as a servant lives in the master's house. A good servant who lives in the master's house takes care of everything. But he always knows and is fully conscious he is not the proprietor. And he will distribute and use whatever that's in the house in such a way only for the pleasure and direction of his master. And that is how reality works. My Guru Maharaj said we should live in this world like we stand on the platform of trains. In India, we stand on platforms, we wait at the platform, and we know where to change train to train. Now supposing you are standing on the platform and your train is half an hour late, another passenger is waiting for another train, this train is 1 hour late. You start talking to each other, you put your baggage together, you discuss everything, the coming elections also. And after everything is over, when the two trains come, you don't tell each other, oh no, now we have to sit down and continue talking, or you don't tell each other that we'll get married. Doesn't happen, At least not often. I had a brahmachari godbrother who was the first disciple of my Guru Maharaj. And for many years he swore on becoming brahmachari. And my Guru Maharaj kept telling him, you will never be brahmachari for life. Call it a curse or a benediction, that's up to you. And then one day, he was in the train and he was lying down on the first, and one Mataji came and she took the top. So she was sitting up there and she was a devotee. And he was going to sleep, he tells us, when suddenly she started singing kirtans. And he said, I was so mesmerized by a kirtan, at that moment I decided that she's going to be my wife. Then Maharaj said, this is the first time I've heard of two people meeting in a train and getting married just like that. Well, devotee, that's different. But we should remember that we should always know that we are on a platform. Anytime we will leave. Whatever bags that we have, we should be very careful to understand that eventually these bags also cannot come with us. Just like Guru Maharaj told me, when you get on board a train in India, the lighter your luggage, the easier for you. Isn't it true? So in our life also we should live that way. We should walk around this world with very little luggage. Less luggage, the easier it is to leave this world. And that is what the sun teaches us. to evaporate. The sun can be reflected in various objects. Isn't it true? You see sunlight reflected everywhere, the other would say. But the sun is one. It is always one. There are not 100 suns dividing themselves. In the same way, the other would say, sometimes our soul can be reflected in different bodies that we take. But the soul itself is always one. We may take different lives. The bodies may be different, but we are still one. You may have been a young boy and you have become an old man, but you know in your heart that you are still the same person. That is the nature of the soul. The other point is, the sun never actually rises and sets, isn't it? It appears to set in this part of the world and it rises in the other part of the world. And the other will say something beautiful. The pure devotees of the Lord, they never leave us actually. Our spiritual masters, the great personalities, they actually don't leave us. They just rise and they set. They appear and they disappear. They appear before us for a time, and then they go on with some other pastime somewhere, and by their mercy they appear before us again. And in the same way, the Avadut said, Krishna himself actually never leaves us. We are the ones who make Krishna leave us or stay with us. By our actions, that's what we do. So we should be very careful to understand that. And I like Prabhupada's point on the sun and Mangala Aarti. You remember Prabhupada said that this movement is so beautiful that everywhere in the world there should be Mangala Aarti going on every hour. So devotees ask, how is that possible, Prabhupada? And Prabhupada said, if you think all around the world, the time zones are all different. Where there is Mangala Aarti today here, and some other place people are sleeping. When you go to sleep here, immediately some other place Mangala Aarti has started. And like that, Prabhupada said, by the mercy of Krishna, there is Mangala Aarti going on everywhere, every time, somewhere in this world. And that is the greatness of how the sun rises and the sun sets. So it's a very important thing for us to remember. Now, the Avadut looked at fire, which is like the sun because it gives heat. And he said, fire, I can get many things I've learned. Fire is a big guru for me, you know. He has taught me so many wonderful things. So Yadu said, tell me, what did he learn? He said, the Avadut said, you see the flame of the fire? Look at the animation. It's amazing, isn't it? Shri Ram Gopal Prabhu ki jai. Wherever he is, he cannot sleep, I think. He's calling him so many times. This fire, he said, look at the fire. The fire, actually, the flame of the fire looks steady. But in reality, it is constantly appearing and disappearing. Very nice observation. A flame will only last for a second, and then it's gone and another flame comes. It keeps regenerating as long as there is fuel. But to us it looks like it's constantly burning. Beautiful observation about it. And then he says, our bodies are like that. The world around us is like that also. Everything looks as if they have the same constancy, same consistence. But factually speaking, the powerful waves of the river of time, they are creating change every moment, imperceptibly. That means something. You are getting old, but you may not see it. But it's happening. Time is passing. We may not feel it, but it's happening. The whole world is temporary. Nothing will last, but we foolishly think that it is consistent and constant. And that is why when we depend on this material world, when we depend on material relationships in this world, inevitably we become disappointed, frustrated. Because it cannot last. It's not the fault of anything, it's the nature of the world. Nature of fire is to burn, nature of water is to flow, nature of this world is to give you the